If Stalin had left Moscow that night, the Soviet Union might not have survived. October 15, 1941. In the shadowed depths of the Kremlin, Joseph Stalin stood alone by a frost-laced window, his breath fogging the glass as artillery rumbled faintly in the distance like an approaching storm. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning documents, orders he himself had issued to evacuate the heart of Soviet power. His personal train waited at a nearby station, engine idling, ready to spirit him away to Kuibyshev, hundreds of miles east, beyond the reach of the encroaching Nazi hordes. For a fleeting moment, doubt gripped him. The man who had forged an empire through iron will now face the abyss of defeat. His hands clenched, knuckles whitening. Should he flee, like so many others scrambling onto trains amid the chaos? But then, a resolve hardened his eyes. "No," he muttered to the empty room, turning from the window. "We stay. Moscow will not fall." Outside, the city teetered on the brink of collapse. German panzers, spearheading Operation Typhoon, had pierced Soviet lines and advanced within 60 miles of the capital, their tracks churning through mud and snow after capturing key towns like Vyazma and Bryansk just days earlier. Panic swept the streets. Factories halted, shops were looted, and throngs of refugees fled eastward, their faces etched with terror, carrying what little they could salvage from lives upended by war. Since Hitler's surprise invasion on June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa, the largest military assault in history, the Wehrmacht had swallowed vast swaths of Soviet territory, from the Baltic states to Ukraine, claiming over 2 million Red Army soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. The human toll was unimaginable. Villages razed, families torn apart, civilians executed in the thousands by Einsatzgruppen death squads trailing the front lines. Yet this was more than a Soviet catastrophe. It was a pivotal fracture in the global war. In Europe, Nazi Germany dominated from the Atlantic to the gates of Asia, its alliances with Italy, Finland, Romania, and Hungary fueling a relentless machine of conquest. Across the Channel, Britain stood defiant but strained after the Blitz, while in America, isolationist sentiments wavered as President Roosevelt extended Lend-Lease aid to the beleaguered Soviets. If Moscow fell, the dominoes could topple. The Soviet Union might sue for peace, freeing Hitler to turn westward unchecked, dooming the fragile Allied hopes. Stalin knew this. His decision to remain wasn't just personal defiance. It was a gamble on the soul of a nation, where one man's stand could ignite the will of millions against the encroaching darkness. As night fell, 1941, dawn broke cold and gray over the Kremlin as Stalin convened his most trusted lieutenants in the dimly lit Sverdlov Hall. The room smelled of strong tea, cigarette smoke, and fear. Lavrenti Beria, head of the NKVD, reported first. Mass desertions at the front, riots in the streets, and rumors that the Germans were already on the outskirts. Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov sat pale and silent, while Marshal Georgy Zhukov, fresh from inspecting the crumbling Mozhaist defense line, stood rigid in his mud-spattered greatcoat, eyes burning with exhaustion. Stalin paced slowly, pipe clenched unlit between his teeth. He stopped abruptly and fixed his gaze on Zhukov. "Tell me plainly, Comrade Marshal, can Moscow be held?" Zhukov did not flinch. "If we fight for every street, every house, yes, but we need time, and we need the people to believe we will stay." A heavy silence followed. Everyone in the room knew what had happened the previous day. Government offices emptied, archives burned, diplomats' wives bundled onto special trains. The evacuation order had leaked, and the city had teetered on the edge of anarchy. Stalin himself had briefly considered leaving. Now the question hung unspoken. Would the vase remain, or would he abandon the capital to its fate? Stalin resumed pacing, then spoke in a low, deliberate voice that carried to every corner. "The government will not leave Moscow. I will not leave Moscow." He paused, letting the words settle. "Those who spread panic will be shot. Those who flee will be treated as deserters. We will defend the capital to the last man." Beria shifted uncomfortably. He had already prepared contingency plans for Stalin's evacuation. Zhukov allowed himself the faintest nod. Outside these walls, the order went out immediately. NKVD barriers rose on every road leading east, turning back fleeing officials and civilians alike. Loudspeakers crackled to life in factories and metro stations. Comrades, the enemy is at the gates, but Comrade Stalin remains with us. Moscow will stand. Yet belief was fragile. On the Mozhaysk line, barely 60 miles west, Soviet troops, many of them raw Siberian recruits, rushed to the front, dug frantic trenches in frozen ground, while German reconnaissance battalions probed for weaknesses. The autumn Rasputitsa, the season of mud, had slowed the panzers, but not stopped them. Hitler had promised his generals a capture of Moscow before winter. His armies smelled victory. Inside the city, a strange calm began to replace the panic. Workers returned to half-empty factories. Women and children filled sandbags under floodlights. And in the Kremlin, Stalin prepared for the longest night of the war so far. October 17, 1941. Snow flurries danced through the air as Stalin descended into the depths of Kharkovsky metro station, transformed into a makeshift command bunker far beneath the city's surface. The platform echoed with the hum of generators and the urgent clatter of typewriters. Maps sprawled across tables, pinned with red and black markers, tracing the German advance. Here, insulated from the Luftwaffe's sporadic raids, Stalin met with his generals, his face a mask of unyielding determination amid the flickering lights. Zhukov spread out the latest intelligence. Army Group Center, under Field Marshal Fedor von Bock, had amassed over 1.8 million troops, 1,700 tanks, and 14,000 artillery pieces for the final push. They had encircled and destroyed much of the Western Front at Vyazma, capturing 670,000 Soviet prisoners in one of the war's greatest encirclements. Now, only fragmented divisions stood between the Nazis and Moscow, men like those of the 316th Rifle Division, hastily armed civilians, and exhausted reserves from the Far East. Stalin leaned over the map, his finger jabbing at the thin red line west of the capital. "Reinforce here," he ordered, voice gravelly from lack of sleep. "Bring in the T-34s from the factories. Every worker who can hold a rifle, arm them." He turned to Anastas Mikoyan, commissar for supplies. "And the weather? Will it hold them?" Mikoyan hesitated. "The mud is our ally for now, Comrade Stalin. But winter is coming early, if we can delay them 2 weeks. Stalin nodded curtly. He knew the risks. Intelligence from spies like Richard Sorg in Tokyo confirmed Japan would not attack Siberia, freeing vital divisions. But the human cost mounted daily. Soldiers freezing in inadequate uniforms, civilians digging anti-tank ditches by hand under enemy fire. In the suburbs, like at Borodino, site of Napoleon's Pyrrhic victory in 1812, Soviet artillery boomed in desperate barges, echoing history's grim parallels. Above ground, the city mobilized. Posters sprang up overnight. "Moscow behind us, not one step back." Women in the Pavlitsky railway yard loaded crates of ammunition, their hands raw and blistered. A young engineer named Alexei, typical of the defenders, kissed his wife goodbye before joining a militia unit, Molotov cocktail in hand, vowing to fight house to house if needed. Stalin's words from the previous day rippled outward, stealing resolve. But as reports trickled in of German scouts spotted near Khimki, just 20 miles away, tension coiled tighter. The vase chain smoked in the bunker, plotting the counterstroke that could turn the tide. October 19th, 1941. In the dim glow of a kerosene lamp inside a forward command post near Volokholamsk, General Konstantin Rokossovsky gripped the field telephone, his voice steady despite the thunder of incoming shells shaking the earthen walls. "Hold the line," he barked at his divisional commanders. "Reinforcements are coming. Siberians fresh and hardened by the cold." Miles away in the Kremlin bunker, Stalin reviewed the dispatches with a grim nod. Rokossovsky's 16th Army was a bulwark against a German thrust from the northwest, and every hour gained was a victory. The Wehrmacht pressed relentlessly. Panzer divisions under General Heinz Guderian looped south toward Tula, aiming to encircle Moscow from below, while Erich Hoepner's 4th Panzer Group hammered northward through Klin. On October 18th, they had overrun the defenses at Mozhaysk, capturing the town after brutal close-quarters fighting that left streets littered with the dead. Soviet snipers picking off officers from shattered windows, only to be flushed out by flamethrowers. The Germans, buoyed by their successes, broadcast propaganda leaflets over the lines. "Surrender, Ivans! Your capital falls tomorrow." But Stalin's defiance echoed in action. He had recalled Zhukov from Leningrad on October 10th to take overall command of the Western Front, granting him sweeping powers. Zhukov, unflinching and ruthless, reshuffled units overnight. The 32nd Rifle Division from the Far East arrived by rail, their fur-lined coats a stark contrast to the ragged greatcoats of the defenders. Anti-aircraft guns were lowered to fire point-blank at tanks, turning boulevards into kill zones. In the factories of Moscow, like the Stalin automobile plant, workers toiled around the clock, producing Katyusha rockets that would soon scream vengeance over the battlefield. The human stories unfolded in the shadows of strategy. A nurse named Maria, bandaging wounds in a makeshift hospital in the Taginskaya metro station, whispered encouragement to dying soldiers. "The vase is with us. We fight for our homes." Families huddled in basements as bombs fell, sharing scant rations of black bread and tea. Desertion spiked. Over 100,000 in the first weeks of Typhoon. But NKVD execution squads enforced Order Number 270. No retreat, no mercy for cowards. Stalin, ever the chess master, pondered his next move. British and American supplies trickled in via Murmansk, trucks, aircraft, boots, but it was the Soviet spirit he counted on. As German scouts reached the Nara River, just 40 miles from the Kremlin, he authorized a daring probe. Reconnaissance teams slipped behind enemy lines, sabotaging supply trains bogged in the mud. The battle's fury built, each clash a testament to endurance amid the encroaching winter's bite. November 1st, 1941. Bitter winds howled through the trenches outside Klin as Colonel General Ivan Konev rallied his men of the Kalinin front, their breaths visible in the freezing air. "Remember Leningrad," he shouted over the din of artillery. They held, so shall we. Back in Moscow, Stalin reviewed the morning reports in the Kremlin bunker, his expression unchanging as aides detailed the latest setbacks. The Germans had captured Tula's outskirts, threatening to cut off supply lines from the south. The tide, however, showed faint signs of turning. The Rasputitsa had deepened into an early freeze, but not before miring German vehicles in axle-deep mud, their fuel lines clogged and troops frostbitten in summer uniforms. Hitler's high command, confident after smashing through Minsk and Smolensk earlier in the summer, now faced logistics nightmares. Supply trains stretched in over 500 miles of partisan-infested territory. On October 30th, Guderian's 2nd Panzer Army ground to a halt near Tula, engines failing in the cold, while Hopner's forces stalled at the Lama River. Stalin seized the moment. He had amassed over 1 million reserves in secret, including elite Siberian ski troops acclimated to sub-zero warfare. Zhukov's plan, codenamed Typhoon Counteroffensive, took shape. Hold the line until December, then strike with fresh divisions. In the capital, civilian militias, Opekensy, swelled the ranks. Factory workers like those at the Kirov plant assembled tanks' personal toll etched deeper. In villages like Istra, overrun on November 25th, civilians face the horrors of occupation. Summary executions, homes torched to deny shelter. A mother named Olga hid her children in a cellar as Stuka dive bombers screamed overhead, the ground shaking with each blast. Red Army stragglers, cut off in the forest, waged guerrilla war, ambushing supply convoys and relaying intelligence via couriers on horseback. Stalin's rhetoric hardened. In a rare radio address on November 6th, eve of the revolution anniversary, he invoked the ghost of 1812. The enemy is not invincible. Winter is our general now. Parades marched through Red Square under camouflage nets. Troops and tanks rolling past the mausoleum before racing to front. It was theater of defiance, broadcast to the world. Allied diplomats in Moscow watched. Cables fly to London and Washington about the Soviets' unyielding stand. Yet doubt lingered in private. As German artillery shells began falling on the city's western suburbs, Stalin pondered evacuation once more, but dismissed it. The battle raged on, each frozen dawn bringing new clashes that would decide the fate of empires. December 5th, 1941. Dawn broke over the frozen fields west of Moscow with a clarity that cut like glass. Soviet scouts on skis glided silently through birch forest near Krakovo, spotting German outposts huddled around dying fires, their sentries numbed from the minus 30 degrees Celsius cold. In the Kremlin bunker, Zhukov unrolled fresh maps, his finger tracing a bold red arrow northward from Narrofominsk. "The moment has come," he told Stalin. "Their spearheads are overextended, fuel depots empty, men dying of frostbite faster than bullets." Stalin studied the reports in silence, pipe smoke curling in the stale air. Intelligence confirmed the Wehrmacht's exhaustion. Army Group Center had lost over 700,000 men since June, their panzer strength reduced by half. Horses, still vital for supply, starved in stables, while partisan attacks severed rail lines nightly. Hitler, from his East Prussian headquarters, raged at delays, dismissing warnings from generals like Guderian who begged to dig in for winter. The Führer demanded one final lunge, blind to the trap closing around his armies. At 3 a.m. on December 5th, the Soviet counteroffensive erupted. Along a 500-mile front from Kalinin to Ilyets, artillery thundered in a barrage unseen since the war's opening days. Siberian divisions, 40,000 fresh troops under General Ivan Pamfilov's successors, poured forward in white camouflage. T-34 tanks churning through snowdrifts where German panzers lay immobilized. Katyusha rockets streaked overhead, their screams shattered in the morning silence. As they tore on the ground, the fighting was savage. Near the village of Dedovsk, Lieutenant Viktor Talalikin's ski battalion overran a German strongpoint, bayonets flashing in hand-to-hand combat amid burning half-tracks. A young private named Zoya Kosmodominskaya, captured days earlier after torching enemy stables, had been hanged as a partisan. Her defiance now in Moscow, the distant rumble reached the city like a promise. Civilians emerged from shelters, eyes lifting westward. Stalin received the first triumphant dispatches. The First Shock Army had broken through at Dmitrov, the 20th Army recapturing Krasnaya Polyana, once the closest German point to the capital, where their officers had glimpsed the Kremlin spires through binoculars. The Vaz allowed himself a rare, fleeting satisfaction, but he knew this was only the beginning. The Germans would not yield easily. As fresh snow fell over the battlefields, the war entered its most brutal phase yet. December 6, 1941. Explosions lit the night sky over Solnechnogorsk as Soviet infantry charged through waist-deep snow, their PPSH submachine guns chattering in deadly bursts against retreating German lines. General Dmitry Lelyashenko's 30th Army pushed northward, reclaiming the town block by block, where Wehrmacht soldiers, shivering in looted Soviet overcoats, fought desperately from ruined buildings. In Moscow, Stalin pored over telegrams in the bunker, marking advances with swift strokes. Klin liberated, Istra retaken. The counteroffensive was gaining momentum, but at a staggering cost, tens of thousands falling in the white expanse, their blood staining the drifts. Zhukov's strategy unfolded like a vice. From the north, Rokossovsky's 16th Army flanked the Germans at Kalinin, while Konev's forces struck from the south near Tula. T-34 tanks, their wide tracks slicing through snow where panzers floundered, led the assaults. On December 7th, the same day Pearl Harbor burned half a world away, drawing America fully into the fray, Soviet troops encircled elements of the 3rd Panzer Group near Klin, capturing vital fuel dumps and artillery. German prisoners, frostbitten and demoralized, spoke of nightmares, endless blizzards. Supply convoys vanished to partisans, and the relentless Red Army emerging like ghosts from the storm. Stalin's hand was everywhere. He had approved the transfer of 100,000 troops in the east, their arrival timed perfectly with the freeze that turned mud to iron-hard ground, favorable now to the attackers. In a late-night call to Zhukov, his voice crackled over the line. "Press them harder. No mercy for the invaders who dared approach our sacred capital." It was an echo of his earlier resolve, but now laced with vindication. The Vaz rarely showed emotion, yet aides noted a subtle intensity as victories mounted. The human dimension sharpened the triumph's edge. In liberated villages like Yakroma, survivors emerged from cellars to greet their rescuers with tears and bread, recounting atrocities. Families machine-gunned, wells poisoned. A tanker named Sergei, his KV, one heavy tank rumbling through the lines, pause to share cigarettes with infantrymen, all united in the bitter cold. Casualties soared. Over 150,000 Soviet dead in the first weeks alone. But the momentum shifted irrevocably. Hitler, furious in his wolf's lair, sacked generals and forbade retreats, dooming thousands more to encirclement. As the Red Army advanced 50 miles in places, pushing the Germans back from Moscow's gates, Stalin contemplated a broader canvas. With Japan tied in the Pacific, the Eastern Front secured, the path to ultimate victory began to crystallize amid the winter's fury. January 5, 1942, in the warmth of his Kremlin office, Stalin reviewed the final maps of the winter counteroffensive, the room heavy with the scent of Georgian tobacco and victory's quiet satisfaction. Outside, Moscow breathed easier, streetcars rumbling again, markets reopening amid the snow-covered rubble. The Germans had been hurled back over 150 miles in places, from the gates of the capital to a ragged line beyond Klin and Kaluga. Zhukov's forces had liberated thousands of square miles, capturing or destroying hundreds of tanks and inflicting over 500,000 casualties on Army Group Center. The turning point had come swiftly after December 5th. By mid-December, Rokossovsky's troops recaptured Kalinin on the 17th, severing German supply routes north. In the south, Timoshenko's southwestern front hammered at Orel, while the encircled remnants of von Bock's armies burned their own equipment to deny it to the advancing Soviets. Hitler's no-retreat order turned retreat into rout. Divisions like the 2nd Panzer disintegrated in blizzards, soldiers abandoning posts to seek shelter in peasant huts, only to be hunted down by partisan bands. Stalin's words during those desperate October days had proven prophetic. Moscow will not fall, he had declared in the Kremlin, a statement that galvanized a nation on the brink. Broadcast and whispered through the ranks, it transformed fear into fury. In his November 7th speech at the Red Square Parade, tanks and soldiers marching straight to the front, he thundered, "The German invaders want a war of extermination against the peoples of the USSR. Well, if they want such a war, they shall have it." It was a vow etched in blood, echoing as Siberian reinforcements skied into battle, overwhelming frost-weakened foes. The consequences rippled globally. With Moscow secure, the Soviet Union endured, drawing Hitler deeper into a quagmire that would consume his empire. Allied confidence surged. Churchill hailed the stand as the beginning of the end, while Roosevelt accelerated Lend-Lease shipments, trucks and aircraft that would fuel future offensives. But the human price scarred eternally. Over 1 million Soviet dead in the battle span, cities like Rzhev left in ruins, families mourning amid the thaw. Stalin, ever pragmatic, looked eastward and westward, planning the long war ahead. The capital had held, not by miracles, but by will forged in fire. As spring approached, the echoes of his defiance lingered, a reminder that empires would crumble, but resolve could rebuild.